Walk into a shut-up bedroom on a still July afternoon after the sun has been leaning on the roof since noon, and the first thing that meets you is not the heat, it is the air itself, thick and used up, pressing against your face like a wool blanket nobody asked for, the kind of stale you can taste at the back of your throat before you even notice you are breathing it. Step into a chicken coop on that same afternoon and it is worse. That sharp ammonia sting rising up out of the bedding, the birds standing with their wings held out from their bodies, not moving, because moving only makes the heat worse. Panting the way a bird pants when its body has no better way to let the heat go.
A sick room in an old farmhouse gets that same heaviness. A back room with no cross-draft. A camper parked in the sun with the windows shut against the bugs. That stale, stinging, used-up air is the same trouble wearing a dozen different faces, and there is a way to break it that costs about $7, takes 15 minutes to build, needs no electric wire run to it, no compressor, no refrigerant, no monthly filter mailed to your door, and once you understand the trick of it, you can keep it running the same way, on the same $7, for as long as you care to tend it, which is the whole reason I am telling you this today, because the answer to how you cool a room for $7 forever is not that you buy the thing once and it lasts forever on its own. It is that the material at the heart of it never wears out. It only fills up, and filling up is not the end of it, because the sun empties it back out again for you, free, and hands it back ready to work another month. So the $7 you spend the first week of the heat is very likely the only $7 you spend all summer. And that is a claim I do not make lightly. So let me walk you through it properly, and let me earn that claim instead of just handing it to you. There are two separate tricks working together here, and once you see both of them, you will understand why this works as well as it does, and why the fancy machines they sell you are, underneath the plastic housing and the brand name, doing the very same thing. The first trick is the oldest cooling there is, and you already know it in your own skin. When you sweat on a hot day and a breeze crosses your arm, you feel the cool of it, because the water leaving your skin is dragging heat away with it as it turns from wet into vapor. That is simply the nature of water. It cannot make that change from liquid to air without taking a portion of heat along for the ride. And so anytime you push air across a wet surface, the air that comes out the far side is a little cooler than the air that went in, because it left some of its warmth behind, soaked into the water it just dried. That is why a wet sheet hung across a doorway takes the edge off a room behind it. That is why our grandmothers laid a damp cloth over the butter crock in the spring house. Move air across wet, and you get cool air out the other end. No machine required, only water and a breeze. And that principle has not changed since the first person noticed it. The second trick is what turns this from a mildly clever bit of homestead wisdom into something worth building on purpose, and it comes down to the material itself, the right kind of charcoal, and I want you to understand just how strange and wonderful this material actually is before I tell you what to buy. A single handful of the right charcoal, if you could somehow unfold every tunnel and crack and pore hidden inside it and lay the whole thing out flat on the ground, would cover a piece of ground bigger than most barns, out of a piece of matter you could close your hand around. It is riddled clean through with passages finer than anything a person could carve, like the most complicated sponge that was ever made. And two things fall directly out of having that much hidden surface packed into so small a space. First, a material built like that can hold an enormous amount of water for its size, far more than it looks like it should, and it lets that water go slowly as air moves across it, which makes it a superb wet surface for the evaporation cooling I just described, better than a plain wet rag by a wide margin, because the air has so much more wet surface to brush against on its way through. Second, and this is the part that turns it into something a store would charge you $300 or $400 for. All those countless little passages reach out and grab hold of the bad things riding along in the air. The smell, the ammonia, the sour, damp compounds that make a shut-up room feel foul, and they hold on to them. There is a word for this: adsorption, the way those compounds stick fast to all that hidden surface, rather than passing on through. But you do not need the word. You only need to know that the air coming out the far side of that charcoal is not merely a few degrees cooler, it is cleaner, because the charcoal has caught the stink and is holding it prisoner in all those tiny passages. That is precisely why this same material sits inside the water filter under your sink, and inside the air purifying machine sitting in somebody's living room corner, costing them a small fortune. They are charging you for the very thing I am about to show you how to build yourself for the price of a sandwich. My name is Cephas Stoltzfus, and I raise dairy cows and keep a flock of laying hens on a farm outside of Intercourse, in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and I have been keeping animals cool through Pennsylvania summers, and keeping this old trick alive in my own household, for most of my 52 years on this earth, which is old enough to remember when nobody thought twice about a tray of charcoal at the window, and young enough, I hope, to still be useful to you in explaining it plainly. Now, before you go any further, I have to stop and be very particular about which charcoal you buy, because get this piece wrong, and none of the rest of what I am telling you will work at all, and you will be left thinking the whole idea was foolishness, when really, you simply bought the wrong bag. You want activated charcoal sold loose as small black granules, and the cheapest place to find it is the pet aisle, marketed for fish tank and aquarium filters, running you somewhere between $5 and $8 a bag depending on the size. You can also find it labeled as horticultural charcoal in the gardening section, or sold specifically as air filter charcoal. And any of those three will serve you the same, because what matters is that it is activated, meaning it has been treated and heated in a way that opens up all those countless internal passages I just described. What you must never use, and I mean never, is the charcoal briquette you cook a hamburger over on the grill. That is an entirely different substance, pressed together with binders and fillers, and it does not carry anywhere near the same riddled structure of pores, so it will neither cool your air nor clean it the way the activated kind will. It will simply sit there, being briquettes. Walk past the barbecue aisle entirely and go straight for the small bag of loose black granules marked activated charcoal. That is the one word you are hunting for on the label. And once you have that bag in hand, the rest of this takes about 15 minutes from start to finish. Find yourself a shallow tray or pan, and it truly does not matter what it is made of. A baking pan you no longer bake with, a plastic storage tray, a shallow wooden box lined with a scrap of plastic sheeting. Anything with enough width to hold a layer of granules while still letting air pass freely across the top of it. Pour your activated charcoal into that tray in a layer about 1 or 2 inches deep, no deeper than that, because what you want is not depth so much as spread, enough surface area exposed that the moving air has plenty to brush against as it passes over. Then take clean water and pour it over the charcoal until the whole layer is soaked through and dark and heavy with it. Let it sit a few minutes to properly drink it in, and then tip the tray gently to pour off whatever water has pooled loose in the bottom, because what you are after is charcoal that is damp clear through like a wrung-out sponge, not charcoal sitting in a shallow puddle, since standing water does not evaporate into moving air nearly as readily as water held inside a damp material does. Then, and this next part is where most folks who try this on their own go wrong and give up on it thinking it does nothing. You give it moving air, and you set it in exactly the right place to catch that air. The very best spot, without question, is right at the opening, where outside air comes into the room, the window where your breeze naturally flows in, the doorway that catches the afternoon draft, the vent opening on a coop or a barn. Set the tray directly in that path so that every single bit of air entering the space has no choice but to pass across that damp charcoal on its way to you or to your animals. If instead you set that same tray in the middle of a table in the center of the room, it will do almost nothing worth noticing, because the cool, cleaned air simply rises off the tray and mixes away into the general air of the room before it ever reaches anybody, and you will never feel the difference. Set it squarely in the intake, directly in the path of the moving breeze, and now every breath of air coming into that space has already been cooled and cleaned before it ever reaches your lungs, and that difference, the placement at the intake rather than out in the open room, is the entire difference between a mildly interesting curiosity and a working system that actually earns its keep. A gentle, natural breeze through an open window will run this system just fine on its own, with no power of any kind. But if you want it working harder, a small battery fan, or better yet, a small fan wired to a bit of solar, aimed to pull air steadily across the tray, will push more air through the damp charcoal and increase what you feel. Though I want to be honest that it is not required, a good honest cross breeze does the job entirely on its own. Now here is the one point of real caution I will not skip past, because I would rather you trust what I tell you than be impressed by it, and that means telling you the whole truth, including the part that matters for your safety. Damp charcoal sitting in a breezy, open space, a coop with its vents open, a bedroom with the window up and air moving steadily through it, is entirely safe, and that is precisely how this is meant to be used. That is where all the good of it comes from. But you must never take a large bed of damp charcoal and seal it up inside a small, closed room with no air movement at all, and then shut yourself inside with the door closed, because wet charcoal sitting in a sealed, unmoving space can slowly draw down the oxygen in that stale, trapped air as it works, and a small, closed room with no exchange of air is already a poor place to be sleeping, regardless of any charcoal in it. So the rule is a simple one, and it happens to be the very same rule that makes the whole system work to begin with, which I find a comfort rather than a coincidence. This is built for spaces where air is moving through, an open window, an open vent, a working cross breeze, a coop that breathes properly, and it is never meant for a sealed, shut-up little room with the door closed and no air passing through it at all. Keep the air moving, which you already want for the cooling to work regardless, and you are both safe and doing it exactly right. Now let me tell you where this trick truly proves itself, because it is not, if I am honest with you, your main living room on the very hottest afternoon of August, and I will explain why in a moment, but it shines brightest in the coop, the barn, the rabbit hutch, the stuffy back bedroom that never gets a proper draft. A chicken coop in the deep of summer is a hard place to be a bird, because hens do not sweat the way we do. They have a poor way of shedding heat on their own, and heat troubles them badly. They begin to suffer once the temperature inside that coop climbs into the high 80s, and it turns genuinely dangerous to them once it passes 100 degrees. Layered on top of that heat is the ammonia rising steadily out of the bedding, stinging their eyes and their lungs, and this is not simply a matter of comfort. It is a real question of the welfare of the flock. Picture now a shallow frame of damp charcoal built into the vent opening of that coop, where the outside breeze naturally enters. You can build the frame yourself from scrap lumber in an afternoon, open on two sides, lined with screen or hardware cloth to hold the granules in place, filled a few inches deep with activated charcoal, and set directly into the gap where the air comes in. Every bit of air entering that coop must now pass through the damp charcoal first, arriving a few degrees cooler thanks to the evaporation, which matters a great deal to a bird that is already panting, and arriving with the ammonia and the stink pulled out of it, because the charcoal has caught those compounds and is holding them fast. The air your flock breathes all day is now both cooler and cleaner, and for a coop struggling through a heat wave, that is not a small thing at all. It is very often the difference between birds that come through the week and birds that do not. The same idea serves a rabbit hutch just as well, a dog kennel in a shaded corner of the yard, a stuffy pocket of the barn where livestock shelter from the sun, and it serves a sick room in the farmhouse where you want the air gentle, a touch cooler, and cleaner for someone who is already unwell and does not need foul air added to their trouble. Set the charcoal at the intake, keep it damp, keep the air moving through it, and you get both the cooling and the cleaning together every single time. Now I must be honest with you about the cooling specifically, because this is exactly the point where I see people oversell the idea, and I will not do that to you. The cleaning of the air, the pulling of smell and ammonia and dampness out of it, works reliably no matter where you live, wet climate or dry, and that part of the trick you can count on absolutely everywhere. But the cooling half of it depends heavily on a partner, and that partner is dry air. Here is the reasoning behind that. Evaporation only cools a space when the surrounding air still has room left to take on more moisture. Out in dry country, the high plains, the western deserts, anywhere the air runs naturally dry, that air is thirsty for water and will pull moisture off the damp charcoal quickly and eagerly, and you will feel a genuine, satisfying drop in temperature. Several degrees you can plainly notice on your skin. But here in the damp east, and worse still down along the Gulf Coast and through the humid south, the air is already carrying a good deal of moisture on a muggy day, so it has far less room left to absorb more water off the charcoal, and the cooling you feel there will be gentler, perhaps a couple of degrees rather than a dramatic plunge. So let me set your expectations honestly, right here, so you are neither disappointed nor misled. In dry country, this will cool a space noticeably. In humid country, the cooling will be modest, a couple of degrees at most, but the cleaning of the air works exactly the same regardless of where you live. I am not going to stand here and tell you a $7 tray of charcoal will cool your entire house the way a machine does on a Mississippi afternoon in August, because it will not, and anyone telling you otherwise is trying to sell you something. What it will do everywhere, without exception, is clean the air passing through it and take some of the sharp edge off the heat right at the spot where that air enters your home or your coop. And if you understand it for what it is, rather than what a salesman might promise, it will serve you faithfully. And now one more honest word, because it belongs alongside everything else I have told you, and this is really the heart of what makes it a $7 forever solution rather than a $7 solution that quietly needs replacing every month, the way the store-bought filters do. The charcoal dries out with use, since it works precisely by being damp, so you will need to re-wet it each morning, which takes perhaps 30 seconds with a cup of water poured over the tray, and skipping that step simply leaves you with a dry tray doing nothing at all, cooling nothing, cleaning nothing. After a month or two of steady work catching smells and dampness out of the air, the charcoal will begin to fill up and slow down in what it can still hold. But here is the part that changes everything. You do not throw it away and buy more the way you would with a store filter. You spread that same charcoal out thin on a tray and set it in full, direct sunlight for the better part of a day. And the heat of the sun drives the trapped compounds back out of all those tiny passages, emptying the material out again and freshening it up, ready to catch another month's worth of work. One single $7 or $8 bag, re-wet every morning and set out in the sun every so often to refresh itself, will see you clean through an entire summer season, which is exactly the promise behind cooling a room for $7 forever. Not that you never touch it again, but that the same $7 keeps renewing itself the whole season through, at no further cost to you beyond a cup of water and an hour of sunshine now and again. I want you to sit with that for a moment because it says something larger than just a tray of charcoal. Think for a moment about what you are ordinarily sold to cool and clean the air around you. The air conditioner runs the whole summer through, every single summer, and you pay for every hour it operates on the electric bill that arrives each month, whether you like the number on it or not. The air purifying machine sits handsomely in the corner of somebody's living room, running $300 or $400 to purchase, and then it wants a brand new filter every few months, which you buy and buy again after that, for as long as you own the machine. Each of those is a perfectly fine piece of equipment in its own right. I will not tell you otherwise, but each one is also something sold to you once and then sold to you again and again. The electricity to run it, the filters to feed it, the repair bill when it fails you in the worst week of the heat, right when you need it most. And here is the quiet truth sitting underneath all of that. The material inside that expensive air purifying machine that is actually doing the work of catching the smell and the foulness out of the air, it is this very same activated charcoal, the identical material, simply pressed into a plastic housing, given a brand name, and sold back to you fresh 4 times a year at a healthy markup. You can buy that same charcoal loose by the bag for a few dollars, set it in a shallow tray at your own window, and freshen it in the sun for nothing at all, forever, for as long as you care to keep doing it. It is not a different secret hiding somewhere. It is the very same material with the expensive housing, the brand name, and the recurring sales stripped clean away from it. That is exactly why so few people know this anymore. Not because it fails to work. It works just as well as it ever did. But because there is no money to be made in a bag of loose charcoal sitting in a tray. Nobody can sell you a monthly replacement filter for a tray you simply set back out in the sun. Nobody can put a brand name on a breeze passing through an open window. This knowledge was never locked away in some vault. It has simply gone quiet, because quiet does not sell, and the expensive version shouts its presence from every store shelf, while the $7 version sits humbly at the windowsill and does its work without a word, remembered mostly by the people who never stopped relying on the simple things to begin with. We rely on the simple things because we must, and because the simple things do not fail you in the very worst week of the summer, and they do not send you a bill every month for the privilege of using them. A man who can cool and clean the air for his family and his animals with nothing more than a tray of charcoal and the breeze already moving through his own window needs to ask no one's permission and owes no one a monthly payment for it. And that, more than the $7 or the 15 minutes, is the whole of what I wanted you to understand today. So here is what I would ask you to do as this heat sets in. Find yourself a bag of activated charcoal, the loose black granules from the pet aisle or the garden section, $5 to $8, and remember plainly that it is not the barbecue briquette you are after. Spread it an inch or 2 deep in any shallow tray you have on hand. Wet it down thoroughly. Pour off whatever water pools loose in the bottom, and set it squarely in the window or the doorway, where your own breeze naturally enters, never out in the middle of the room, where it will do you no good at all. Keep the air moving steadily through it. Re-wet it each morning, and if it is your animals you are most concerned for, build the small screen-faced frame and set it into the coop vent or the hutch opening where their air comes in, and give your flock and your rabbits cooler, cleaner air through the hardest stretch of the season. And hold on to the one rule that matters above all the rest. Air moving through, always, an open window, an open vent, a genuine cross breeze, and never a sealed, shut-up room with the door closed against it. Tell me, when you try this yourself, where you end up setting your own tray, the bedroom window, the coop vent, the barn, the camper parked out back, and if you happen to live down in the humid South, I would especially like to hear what kind of drop in temperature you actually notice, since I have told you honestly to expect it gentler there, and I want to know what you find in your own home. I read every word that comes back to me, and hearing what people find when they try this in their own corner of the country is a good part of why I keep telling it. Next time, since the flock has come up more than once today, I intend to walk you through the whole of how we keep our own hens cool and healthy clear through a heat wave, the shade we build for them, the water we set out, the dust bath they need, and the way we lay out the coop itself so the heat never has the chance to build up in the first place, which is really the natural next step from everything I have told you here. Until then, keep the air moving. Let the water and the charcoal do the quiet work they were always meant to do. And remember that the people who first built this country with their own two hands understood a great many things about keeping cool and keeping well that we are only now, slowly, starting to remember for ourselves.